Hey guys, so in lesson 5, we're going to talk about to buy or to lease, and we'll talk about the pros and cons of both. We kind of touched on this a little bit, but like the other slides, I just want to dive a little deeper into it and kind of give you some context and which way to go. So the benefits of leasing, affordability, and initial investment. So like we said before, when I first started, I had $7,500. I leased a place that was roughly $1,200, was $1,250 a month. And I turned it into a 8-bed facility. Actually, it was 7, but then I got a bid increase to 8. And I stayed there myself. I saved my money up. It was just a lot cheaper to get into, because I worked the deal out with the landlord. I had just gave him 1 month's rent, and he gave me 2 months off to get the licensing. The property was actually sitting on the market for a long time, so I was able to like come to him and say, "Hey, I'll do a long-term lease," and it was only a 2-year lease, but that was long term to him. He was just happy to have someone in there because the house was sitting. And I did a little bit. I invested. I painted. I did a little bit of work myself, because I was a contractor before, so it wasn't a big deal for me to kind of make some improvements. So he was actually happy about that, and so we worked out a deal. Um, that being said, it's a lot cheaper to kind of work these deals out than purchasing a property when you have to pay a down payment and interest rates could be high at the time. So that may be a way to get in, to a house fairly cheap. Um, then, along with that, you have access to prime locations. So to imagine purchasing a house in prime location can be super expensive. But to lease a place, the rent may be a little higher, but you don't have to put a whole down. You don't have to put a whole down payment of 20% of, say, $900,000 if you want to buy a property in a prime location. You might have a $4,000 or $5,000 lease, and you can work that same kind of deal and only just get in a house for 5 to 10,000. It depends on if the person's giving you a deal, what kind of deal you work out with them. I always tell my clients, hey, don't be afraid to ask, because if you don't ask, you won't get it. So squeaky wheel doesn't get oil. So some people say, I don't want to ask, I don't want to insult anyone. It's business. So in business, you ask for what you want and let the person say no. And you'd be surprised. Some people will entertain just about anything, especially if they're motivated enough and they believe in you enough um, to take care of their property. Especially landlords, if you look at them, they're going to be just like an investor. So you give them a copy of your business plan. You say, this is what I want to do with the location. This is going to be my policy and procedure. This is what I want to do, run the facility at your place. I have all my ducks in a row. This is what I'm going to do. And they're going to say, wow, this person has their stuff together. This looks like it's going to be a very lucrative business. Can you do a long-term lease, 4 or 5 years? And then you say, yes, they got a tenant for 4 or 5 years. So it works out for both parties. Uh, Minimal maintenance responsibility. So you can have an agreement where you do you take care of the wear and tear inside the facility. But say if it's a roof leak or an HVAC system, they have to fix it. When you own a place, that's going to be all on you. So you have to be the one to take care of these big issues that pop up. Then flexibility and scalability. So because you have that low overhead getting in, you may have cash, you may have more cash to kind of scale. So you can go off to the next place when you start making a little more money, and then lease another place and then lease another place. Some people I know have 3 properties they just lease. I wouldn't suggest that, but some people say, hey, I'll never want to own a place. So I say, okay. I mean, it worked for me, and I see it working for other people, and it's definitely a great way to go if you're trying to get into this industry and you don't have a whole bunch of money, and you are trying to get into a neighborhood where otherwise you wouldn't be able to get into it if you had to purchase a property. So just keep that in mind. The challenges of leasing. So on the other hand, you have limited control of the property. That owner can be like, hey, say if you have a property that's big enough to house 12 people and you want to put a sprinkler system in. you have to then get permission from that owner to add a sprinkler system. And they could be like, well, I don't want you busting holes in my walls to put a sprinkler system in. That could be a problem because now that's messing with your bottom line. You could be making more money if you had more clients. And now this person is stopping you from putting a sprinkler system in their home. I would always suggest you add that stuff in before, like, hey, this house has potential for this amount of clients. Eventually, I would like to put a sprinkler system in, and you just have them sign it all at the beginning because maybe they'll change their mind later, and then you'll be stuck. So at least in an agreement, you can at least have things mapped out in the beginning. I will pin in this program. I will pin a example of a commercial lease that I use for my rentals that I give to my clients as well. And you guys can reverse engineer that and change the wording so you can see fit. And it's a kind of a hybrid lease that I had my lawyer draft up for a lease that I did a while back. So you guys can have that. Then the next one is rent increases. So of course, you have owners, they're going to want to do rent increases. So every year you have to worry about 5% or however many percent they decide on raising the lease up into the legal limit of the state. So each state has a different legal limit of how much you can raise the rent. And that talking about if you do a long-term lease, it can kind of get expensive. So imagine 5% of like 4,000 every year, your rent is, jumping up significantly, which is taking out your bottom line. And then, your long-term costs, while leasing seems cost-effective initially, the, cumulative lease payments could definitely add up from what I just said. And it may be involve fees, other than rent. So they may say, oh, hey, like you now have to like put in for a new HVAC system. This is why you get all this stuff in writing ahead of time. So it's not any surprises. You always, when you're talking about business, it's going to be a little more it's just a little more involved when you're talking leasing agreements for business because you don't want to be stuck holding a bag for someone else's property. So even though you're making money from the property, it's still not yours. You don't own it. And the benefits of purchasing, ownership and asset building. So yeah, I mean the overhead, the cost to get in the door may be a little more, but you own that asset for now. So any equity in that property, you get to pull out if you ever need it, if you ever wanted to expand. So if you had bought the place for $300,000 and you got it appraised, and now it's appraising for $400,000, you can then take that, do a line of credit, and take that and either use it in your current location or use that to get another place. So I always, advocate if you can always start out leasing. But eventually, if you're doing this long enough, you should probably own your property, just for these very reasons. You want to expand, you pull the money out. And then when you're trying to sell too, because I've sold a few of these, when you want to sell, it's easy to wrap the property up into the sale because you can sell a business by itself, but then you have to then work on an agreement with the owner of the building and then the new buyer of the business and you guys, it's just another like wheel in the cog that you just have to make sure fits into place. And when you own a building, you don't have to worry about, the landlord messing up your sale of your building or messing up the sale of your business. So you always have full control. So, even the customizations of the building, we talk about the sprinkler system. You own the building, you can just say, oh, I'm going to add a sprinkler system. I'll pull out a line of credit and add a sprinkler system in my property. You don't have to worry about anything. You don't have to worry about asking anyone. It's your property. And then your expenses become a little more predictable because you don't have someone saying, okay, well, I think this problem happened because of your residents overusing this. And so, just all, it's all on you. So something happens, your fixed monthly income, that's just all on you. So it may be more money getting into in the beginning. So leasing definitely has its benefits, but purchasing also has just an equal amount of benefits as well. So, and then purchasing challenges. High initial costs, we talked about that. So you want to get into, prime prime location, you're going to have to pay. And say you get, a property that say costs $1 million, you're going to have to, that's 20%. For investment property, you have to come out of your pocket with $200,000 just to buy the property. And then you have to buy furniture and pay the mortgage until you get licensed. Because the mortgage companies, they don't want to care that you're owning an assisted living facility. So it's one of the things where, you're just going to spend a lot more money purchasing a property. And then there's this limited flexibility. It's easier to kind of break a lease or buy your way out of a lease if you want to expand. So like the initial property that I bought, I outgrew it. So I had 3 months left on my lease, and I told the guy, I said, hey, can I just pay these 3 months or pay you a month and a half or however you want to do it? And I'm going to move my client, because I had built a location. I had built another location, and I told my clients that the facility I was leasing that, we were going to relocate because I actually built a bigger facility. And they were like, oh, the clients were happy, but I still had to go to the landlord and say, all right, I have 3-4 more months, I don't really remember, on a lease. So we just negotiated like a lease buyout. I gave them the money, lease was terminated, and I just moved my clients. So purchasing a property, you have to find a sale, and it just may be more involved than just breaking a lease and moving your clients to a new location. Then, as you know, when you own a house, the responsibility of maintenance is 100% on you. So you have to keep that kitty, what we talked about before. You have to keep money aside. Even when you lease a place, you should just always have a certain percentage of your monthly income just go directly into an account where it's going to be for maintenance or things that you initially want to fix up later, or just unexpected stuff that you will pop up. So just know when you own a property, it may be a little more because you don't have a landlord to go to and say, hey, the AC went out. Are you going to fix it, or do you want to go half? It's all on you then. So just some food for thought. But there's definitely benefits to both, and negatives to both. But wherever you are on your journey, whichever one makes sense to you, you can make this work for yourself, because it's different ways to be crafty and to say, hey, I'm going to get in this business, and I'm not going to let anything stop me. Yeah, I can't buy a property right now, but I'll lease and build later. Oh yeah, I can buy a property. Oh, and then I may lease another one to get started really quick. Like I know a friend of mine, he got into the industry and he bought a property to begin with, and then he leased the second one. He said, oh, I want to get into this neighborhood in Bethesda. And he's like, but I can't afford to pay this. So he had one in Baltimore. He leased a house in Bethesda. So it just depends on, what properties come your way. And if you have to figure out how to get in no matter what. So you have options.